I'm going to talk to you today about my feeling about how to turn clinical ideas into market opportunities and why people come to your companies in order to use it. And actually, some of our companies use Greenlight Guru. Some of our companies use a bunch of stuff that's out here. So we're really happy to be here. Appreciate Joe allowing us to come here today and talk about this. We have 25 minutes. I'm told that if I'm not done in 25 minutes, I get thrown off. I will go through this reasonably quick. So if I do that and there are questions that you want, the easiest thing to do is, well, I have to run today. I'm going to try and be back tomorrow. But also you can email me at hlevin, L-E-V-I-N, @caridia.com. Feel free to do that. So what I'm going to do is explain how ideas are moved from academics to industry, explore some of the problems of doing that, give a pathway that we've used to do that, and talk to you a little bit about, if we have time, about what's a patent, and for those people in the audience who want to be inventors, you know, how to handle that. So we founded 6 companies. All are either acquired. Mark Gelfand and I started out at Hopkins together in academics and moved through into industry. We've been working in our incubator called Caridia for the past 15 years, 120 plus patents issued in the US, 150 pending, raised $100 million in venture funding in our companies and returned over $1.4 billion to our investors. We've done everything from functioning as CEO, CMO, CTO to sweeping the floors. And in a startup, that's just the things you got to do. We've now focused primarily on doing things from back of the napkin to first in human proof of concept, and that's where a lot of the companies that are here today come in helping us. These are some of the companies that we've started and have been sold. So I started off as an undergraduate biomedical engineer, except there was no biomedical engineering when I started. It was electrical engineering and computer science. Master's then, did my medical school, did cardiology at Johns Hopkins, ran the mechanical cardiac assist program or artificial heart program at Columbia for a while. And while I really like clinical medicine, I also like doing early stage stuff. So I moved from there into startups. So I left academics to join my first company. And that was in '99. So what I want to do is talk to you about the relationship between physicians and engineers. And it's been a very long and close relationship. And it's changed somewhat over time. And I just want to go through the history of it a little bit and tell you how we as clinicians think of it and how you as engineers and companies should think about how you could add value and how we can add value to you. So the relationship started a long time ago with a number of things. Initially, as you see in the top right, that was one of the first pacemakers. That's actually a true pacemaker that was implanted in a human. And it was a bunch of watch batteries and a timing circuit from Popular Mechanics embedded in epoxy, literally. Built in a garage by a guy named Earl Bakken, who founded and now is the $5 billion or $10 billion company called Medtronic. So physicians work very closely with engineers, even the early stuff like heart valves. It was based on a bottle stopper from the idea from the late 1800s. And at the time, device manufacturers considered physicians to be really into it or necessary. But then physicians found that if they wanted to move things forward, they needed to work closer with engineers. And they needed to understand more about how engineers did things. And that was because in 1976, essentially 510Ks and PMAs came in. So the FDA started to regulate things, and that was when physicians and engineers figured out we actually had to really work together to figure out how they did. So how does a physician in the clinic or in academics, et cetera, come up with an idea and then end up coming to you for help? Well, the problem is they have this idea, but they have no access in the academic environment, essentially, to engineering, real engineering. They have academic engineering, but no real engineering. So the inventor wants to publish the early results because that's what you do in academics. That's the currency of academics is publications. So they file one US or a PCT, a European EU application, and they describe it in great detail, except they have very little engineering enablement of that design there. So the university gets this really nice patent with very narrow claims. They feel that they've got $1 billion thing on their hands, and when they try to get it licensed, they get really surprised. The problem is that, especially in Europe, the seminal patent discloses some really unworkable problem. You know, and the recent heart valve called the transaortic valve replacement, TAVR, which is the hottest thing in medicine, was actually invented by a guy who filed the initial patent in 1995-ish. And then there was work done in Europe, and the original one had said, okay, we're going to replace the valve, but we're going to have little hooks hooking into the side of the aorta where the valve is supposed to sit. Well, it turns out that that sucked. You know, it just wasn't implementable from an engineering point of view, and there were much better ways. The problem is that inventor just prevented anybody from owning the field because of the way it works in academics, they didn't file follow-on applications, and the ones that they filed don't protect the entire field, just their one way. So everybody else then says, okay, we're going to come up with our own ways of doing it. All the intellectual heavy lifting was done in academia. The industry generates lots of patents with sophisticated, better ideas. And the inventor has to say, well, I'm not going to make any money, and the company and the academics, the university's not going to make any money, but we were first. So that's a problem, and it doesn't help anybody. So what's the right way to do it? And this is where you guys come in terms of the different services that you provide here. So academic scientists, clinicians come up with an idea and start a company, but they found they couldn't do all the stuff to commercialize it to humans. Originally, they hired an execution team, which then was supposed to make this commercial device, do clinical trials, start sales, etc. The problem is that they failed in this gap in transitioning things from the research sort of clinical concept idea to actual commercial device. So that led to the development of incubators in a whole industry of medical device companies that help both provide the information, you know, clinical research opportunities, design control, etc., to help for incubators to bridge that gap, move into the execution, and then lead to the sales and marketing. The problem with physicians is that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So how do we figure out if an idea is good or not? Well, they've been working on an idea for years that's been NIH funded, looks like it works well in animals, may have some clinical benefit. Or while placing a stent, they noticed that if the catheter had a specific curve, or some of your harder cases would become faster or easier. They noticed that if pacemakers implemented their new stimulation algorithm, it would improve cardiac output in their most difficult patients. So are these good ideas? Yes, no? Yes. The answer is for mankind, yes. For a business, maybe. Why? So things that make a business, and this is when you take on a client as the companies that are here. When you take on a client, are they a viable client for you, or can you add value to the people that are actually doing this stuff? So being a business means that there are enough patients to use it in, that it's simple enough to use widely in those patients, that it can be developed in an appropriate amount of time and money for the investor, that means the venture capitalist usually, or the strategic, to make a return on their investment. So fundable doesn't mean that it works great clinically and I personally need it frequently, which are a lot of people that may come to your booth, you know, if you were at a place where there are a lot of clinicians that would come to your booth and say, I need you to help me, I'm gonna give you a big piece of the pie, this is really great, I need you to spend your time on it. Fundable does mean that your device is better than existing ones, it's in a really hot area, you found the 1 in 10 VCs who believe in your concept, how good a job you do presenting that plan, and how lucky you are to be at the right place at the right time. So good for mankind are funded by NIH, Foundation, other not-for-profits. Things that are businesses are funded by VCs or strategics. So when I give this talk to physicians, it's a question of how do you choose which of those ideas that you've come up with or other people have come up with should you spend your time on? And for you guys, it means which physicians, companies, startups should I spend my time on or take part of my payment in equity or other things in terms of my reimbursement. So this is where you guys come in. It's very hard for a clinician or scientist to competently evaluate all of the marketing, clinical, engineering, IP, reimbursement, regulatory, etc. on their own. Not trained, don't have experience. They need to partner with somebody like yourselves in order to, somebody that's been through it, and consider doing things like licensing to incubator, taking royalties, or starting a company with the people they partner with So what areas should these people be focused on, and what should you look at when people come to you and say, this is my great idea, I'd like you to help me with it? So breakthrough therapies tend to start in academics. Better tools are usually developed by industry or by clinicians in the trenches. So you want to start at the top where there's a large clinical need, and you can make a better tool, which is not commonly, again, what physicians do. Some clinicians can make suggestions to you and come to you and ask you, can you make this catheter for me? Can you do this, etc. But what the big ones are those things where you make a new device opportunity in the pharma space, and renal denervation, other for hypertension, things for diabetes, etc. Those are where the really big money is right now. COPD, pulmonary valves, things like that. Or you could have a disruptive opportunity in existing device space. So you take something that's surgical and make it interventional, valves. You take an implant to a procedure. So if you could take a pacemaker and turn that pacemaker into a simple one-time procedure that you don't need an implant for. Or what people really pay a lot of money for, if you can increase the number of procedures by turning over things faster, making the procedure faster. The monorail guide wire was a great example of that. Decreasing the costs. Or if you threaten their franchise. So if you have a surgical valve and somebody comes with a percutaneous valve, you're likely to get a high acquisition price or get a lot of money for developing it because you're threatening their cash cow, their franchise. And in the end, what you have to understand is they're coming to you to help them, and this is a very important point, they're coming to you to help them get clinical data and develop IP. You have to separate out when the people coming to you, when a startup coming to you is asking you to help them develop clinical data and generate IP that they can sell and be acquired by a larger company versus they're asking you for a manufacturing contract to make a device that you're going to make money on them selling. And it makes a big difference to our vendors for some of our different companies when you come to them and you have to explain because sometimes then they're going to end up dealing with you on a cost-plus basis, and sometimes if it ends up with a manufacturing contract, for us it's good because we can backload some of the costs, etc. So that, if you're dealing with startups, I would truly suggest that you understand where they are in their development cycle, what they want to do, and how do you want to interact with them to make sure that they're going to get what they want and you're going to be able to make money. So how do you find an idea? And this is questions that you can ask them to make sure it's actually worth your time. They should have asked these questions to figure out whether it's worth their time. But you don't want to commit engineers, project managers, resources to projects that you don't feel are going to get you somewhere. So it has to be a big enough unmet clinical need. Are the indications good, and do they believe they're going to have an overall clinical benefit that's better than something else that people will pay for their device? Do they have an initial device design and some other ideas about which way to go? Can you help them with that, etc.? Are they developing a totally new approach? Can you help them by repurposing some existing technologies? If you can do that, it helps them a lot. One of the biggest problems is stacking risk. So the more you can do, for example, if you can take an accelerometer from an iPhone or the aerospace industry and put it into a pacemaker, you save $1 million or $2 million in development for that particular company because they now, you don't have to start from scratch. That's where you can save a lot of money in helping people to do that. Clinical and regulatory risks. So the clinical and regulatory people here, you need to help the physicians understand or these startups understand, what are the number of patients required? What inclusion and exclusions do they have? Are there short-term endpoints that are believable that are going to get them to be able to raise more money and be able to pay you? What's the required duration of follow-up? What's the IP risk? Do they have freedom to practice? Are you doing something that's going to be a dead end because it was a great engineering idea, but somebody did it 5 years ago and the guy just never looked to check? Is their device novel? In today's world, reimbursement is big. If it's going to take 10 years from idea to approval, that's much different than 2 years from idea to approval. So you have to look at it and figure out, is this something that you can help get through the process quickly, or is this something that's going to take a long time and a lot of money, and you may be retired before they get through? Sales and marketing risks. Is it a normal referral pathway? Who owns the patient in terms of physicians? Does it fit into their existing skill sets, et cetera? Is there an exit strategy? Is there only one acquirer that is going to acquire it, that could potentially acquire it, and it's going to drag out for years because they're going to force the company to show sales, et cetera? Or are there multiple potential acquirers in that space, and they're going to be able to bid one against the other? So did they need a sales ramp, et cetera? The physicians and the startups should have gone through a matrix similar to this to determine whether it's worthwhile to do it. And 90% of this can be done on paper. You don't even have to set foot in the lab for one day in order to get rid of most of the projects. So I would encourage you, if this is the type of area that you're in and you want to make sure that the people coming to you are actually going to be around a year from then and be able to pay you, to think a little bit about asking them this. So one of the important points, it's really comparatively easy to come up with an idea that if it works, is going to have a significant impact on patients. Is it going to work on 1% of patients, or is it going to work on 90% of patients? That's why it's very hard to find a commercially viable project that fit all those criteria for success. The synergy in places like this, and hopefully you'll get, there'll be more interaction between startups, physicians, and companies that are here. Synergy is essential, and your experience is what's going to help drive the benefit for them. Use the physicians to reduce both physiological and clinical risk, but don't let physicians tell you how to drive your engineering. You got to stand up and tell them what the answer is. I have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to give you guys a choice. I can either go through and explain to you what patents are on a high level and who's an inventor, stuff like that, because a lot of physicians like to see that, or I can answer questions. So it's your guys' choice.
Show of hands for patent. Show of hands for question. Patent wins.
Patent wins. Okay. This actually, even as far back as ancient Greece, there was an idea you had to protect inventors from things. But actually, patents came out of the plague. So when the plague came in Europe, most things were trade secrets. It was passed down from family member to family member, generation to generation. And during the plague, a lot of these things were lost because people got wiped out. So the king, I forget of what country, Italy, Republic of Florence, said that we're going to give you protection if you tell us exactly how to do everything and you enable it. So you explain what you did, and somebody can pick up this patent and be able to do exactly what you did. We're going to give you a monopoly on it for a certain amount of time, which in the US now is 20 years. But after that, it's available to everybody. And that's how patent law came about. And in order to do it, it's like real estate, right? So you own this piece of land, you own this piece of land, you know where the borders are. If you want to come and trespass on my land, you got to buy it from me, you got to pay me something called a license or royalties to do that. So the fundamentals haven't changed. What it doesn't do, it does not give the inventors right to manufacture or sell the covered product. What it does is it allows you to exclude other people from stepping on your turf. So if you look at this, what you want to find out is when somebody comes to you and says, I want you to build this, and we're going to sell this, and we're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to give you part of the money that we make, called our license, what do you do? What does that mean? Well, there's community stuff, which is called the public domain stuff. There's stuff that belongs to other people, and there's stuff that belongs to you or the manufacturer. So if on the right side in that product straddles what belongs to the manufacturer and what belongs to others, the stuff about the product that in the circle that says belong to the others is infringing. And the people who own that intellectual property can stop you from selling that, which means you don't make money when you produce it. The product that's in the manufacturer owns exclusively means that they can sell that and they get all of the money for that. You can license or co-license the stuff that's in the infringed area and be able to make money on it, but it's all a deal. So, and also inventorship is very specific. It is a legal definition, it's contractual. So if you as a manufacturer have an employee who's an inventor, you actually have rights to that patent. This is one of the big problems that startups deal with and I deal with on a daily basis in terms of going to contract manufacturers, is that will they assign their intellectual property rights to me, or do I have to license it from them? And that makes a big difference in how you make a contract with the place that you're working with. There's basically, to go through quickly, it has to be novel and non-obvious. And non-obvious is an ordinary people skilled in the art. So imagine a fresh biomedical engineering graduate with a library card, but non-inventive. Would it be obvious that all of the elements that make up that patent are obvious to him?